In a league bubbling over with heated rivalries, dare I say, the Battle of Alberta might be going dormant.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Everyone, and welcome to this Christmas Day edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. This is my 10th season doing digital hockey content, my third as a host here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And I want to thank everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, where if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, you can visit FanDuel.com and place live NFL bets all season long. On today's show, we are going to walk through the Oilers' resounding victory in the Battle of Alberta on Tuesday night. And yes, I know this episode is a little bit behind where it needs to be, but I told you in advance, so it's okay. So to start out, we will talk about why that win, even though Calgary's not very good, resounding, confidence instilling, all good things. Our second segment, we'll go under the hood and talk about why, for a blowout, this looked relatively unconventional. And then in our final segment, we'll talk a little bit about what the recipe for victory is going to look like in Calvin Pickard, and I almost said Stuart Skinner, caught myself, Calvin Pickard and Connor Ingram starts. So to set the tone, to give a bit of context, in professional sports, like much of life, honestly, you can look at a lot of these games through the glass half full or the glass half empty mentality. And there are always going to be a contingent of people who, no matter who the Oilers happen to be playing on a given night, their perspective is going to be, well, they are a better team, they should win. And most of the time, I agree with that caveat. If we line up two teams, one having significantly more talent than the other, the way the Oilers do in relation to the Flames, I, most of the time, am going to expect the Oilers to outplay their opposition. They're going to create more favorable game circumstances, and ultimately, they are going to prevail. The reason I do point out that it's still a good win, even if it is a middling Calgary team. I know Calgary's been a little bit better as of late, 6-4-0 in their last 10 after the loss, compared to where they were, say, 3 weeks ago, where they were amongst the worst teams in the NHL. Now they're just a middling team. A lot of people would say the Oilers are supposed to beat them. Calgary stinks. Calgary has no expectations. The Oilers are in the midst of a great run of hockey as of late over the last 10 games or so. And if we line these two teams up, I expect to win most of the time. The reason I want to talk about just purely winning the game and why the way they won feels good, there are a lot of little things circumstantially that work against you in this league. So let's start out with the obvious. Provincial rival. Anytime we're talking about a divisional opponent, someone you see several times, 3 or 4, depending on the year, anytime you see an opponent that many times in a given season, you're introducing a bit more variance to the equation because that team is familiar with you, especially a provincial rival, someone you see the 4 times a year, someone who has had quite a bit of holdover roster-wise over the years. So you guys are familiar with their guys are familiar with your guys, and it creates a bit of closeness that might not necessarily otherwise be there because of that familiarity. And we talk about it a lot in the other sports. In football, it's almost impossible to beat a team in your division twice, no matter how much better or worse than you they are. And in the context of this, provincial rival, the last game before a multi-day break, it would have been really easy for the Oilers to go into that game, coming off of the run of form they're on as of late, and effectively chalk it up as a win. To say, we're better than Calgary, even with a C-plus effort, we should be able to beat them. We're not going to need to do that much. And instead, the Oilers came out and won with about as resounding of a victory as you're going to be able to manufacture. And it would have been really easy for the Oilers to leave this game on the table and let Calgary hang around in a way that a month ago would have been what my expectation was. I spent much of November coming on the Locked On Oilers every day, and my everydayers are probably poking fun at me at this point for being as worried as I was in November. But for the entirety of the month of November, it felt like no matter what the Oilers did on a nightly basis, their output was entirely unpredictable. Now, as the lineup has come into focus and has started to crystallize to some degree, the consistency has started to ramp up. I am starting to get an understanding of what are reasonable expectations for player X or player Y. And with so much working circumstantially in the Oilers' favor, I was very impressed in the way they came out and took care of their business. You can only play who's in front of you. No matter what, if you beat a good team, you get some credit. If you beat a bad team, you don't get as much credit. But in this league, especially in a season like this one, where it looks like we are going to have an absolute bloodbath in the Western Conference, and the Eastern Conference is going to be, by comparison, a walk in the park, every single one of these games has a little bit of extra weight. And Calgary probably not going on any type of run to make some noise, even though it only takes one good week to get back in the mix in the playoff race in both conferences. But with so much working for them, 7-2-1 in their last 10, they've outscored opponents 40-28. The Oilers are averaging 3.4 power play opportunities per game. That's almost a full more power play opportunity per game. They've gone 13 for their last 34 on the man advantage, and they have gotten .897 save percentage hockey in this 10-game window. That's not asking a whole lot. If the Oilers can go 7-2-1 with .897 save percentage hockey, I think that tells you a lot about the quality of the team over the last 2 weeks, because .897 hockey is pretty bad. If you go over and you look at on a team basis, .897 on a team-wide basis in all situations would be 10th. The Seattle Kraken team save percentage is .897. The Oilers, as of the time of this recording on Wednesday evening, are still in dead last. .875 team save percentage in the year of our Lord 2025. So I do think it's important to continue to highlight that the Oilers are not asking a whole lot. And we'll talk about that more in our final segment. We'll talk about the recipe for winning games with third and fourth string goalies, the way the Oilers are going to attempt to. But I know a lot of this conversation has sounded like the Oilers did us a favor. They beat up on opponent they're supposed to. And generally speaking, I go to the Chris Rock school of congratulations, which are, if you're doing your job, you're not supposed to get credit. I take care of my kids. Good. You're supposed to take care of your kids. You don't deserve credit for that. But in the sports world we occupy right now, I really did go into that game on Tuesday night kind of expecting the Oilers to lay an egg. But that's the type of win you put together, not just a win, but a resounding, controlling, confident win to the point the game ends in a scrum, how frustrated the other team is. That's the type of game that shows me you are making progress as a hockey team, because you didn't take your opponent lightly. You didn't let them hang around. You thumped them, you frustrated them, and you broke them to some degree. So we are going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, I'm going to tell you, for as bad as the score looked, the underlying numbers were even worse. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. Receivers get hot, defenses tighten up, or a momentum swinging turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment with live spreads and money lines that adjust after every play. Player props that update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scorer, drive results, game totals, and so much more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. We got a triple header of games here on Christmas Day. Cowboys at the Commanders, 8.5-point road favorites. The Lions at the Vikings. Not sure who's going to be starting at quarterback for the Vikings. The Lions are 7.5-point road favorites, trying to keep their playoff dreams alive. And then to close out the day, The Broncos are going to Kansas City, where the Broncos are 13.5-point road favorites, where the Chiefs will be starting their third-string quarterback. And if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place live NFL bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you so much to everybody that is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On Oilers. And thank you for everyone who has helped make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And if you haven't already, go check out the Everydayer Club. Check out the link down in the show notes for more information. You can get episodes with no ads and access to the exclusive Everydayers Discord server with other Locked On personalities and every other Everydayer Club members. So, real quick, anytime you get a Connor night like that, you get a Leon night like that, you simply clap in greatness, because you are watching things that you will never see happen again. And we will see superstar talents again. That's just the cycle of sports. But for Connor and Leon to play at this high of a level, the way they are right now, in conjunction with each other, is just magic. There's no other way to describe the feeling watching those guys play hockey gives me than pure magic. That freedom, that creativity, that controlled chaos truly puts so much of this game into perspective. There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who have picked up a hockey stick at some point in their life and thought about trying to make some of those plays happen. And those guys do it against the highest level of competition in the best league in the world. And when I think about a good old school whipped like a government mule type win, that's the type of game, the one against Calgary on Tuesday night, that comes to mind. Because it's one thing to win on the scoreboard generally, and it's funny, it's really ironic. When a team gets out to a big lead in hockey, generally, when you would look at the underlying numbers, the team that's losing by several goals is usually going to end up having a decent underlying numbers night because of the way score impacts work on the control of a game. Because hockey is a pick your spots, choose your runs, and be situationally aware sport, not everybody physically has the capacity to perpetually push for offense over and over and over and over again. Now, there are bad versions of this where teams shell once they get to a certain lead, and then it becomes a matter of trying to turn the light switch back on, where they get out to a 2-0 or a 3-1 lead, and you always say the worst lead in hockey. That happens in real time because teams stop pushing for offense. And to be fair, we do have to be realistic. It's not plausible to say every single shift is going to be full tilt for chance creation and trying to score. Now, ideally, you would like it to be, but that's just not a realistic understanding of the way the control of a game happens to go. When you think about getting out to a big lead, the other team usually ends up making some type of concerted push back, and that usually manifests in shot attempts, scoring chances, and expected goals. Not necessarily high danger chances, but you accumulate enough low danger chances, it ultimately ends up making your expected goals numbers look a little bit better because you threw 50 low quality chances at the net. And generally, that leads to games with a score line like Tuesday nights being the score, and then the underlying numbers are Oilers 39% scoring chances, Calgary Flames 59, because the Flames, down several goals, have the puck a lot. And they get the puck down to the Edmonton end. But because the Edmonton Oilers would have a multiple goal lead, they're going to be more than content to let the Flames accumulate all of those crappy, low danger chances from the outside and create a bit of a misleading underlying number situation. Tuesday night, that was not the case. By period, the Oilers outchanced Calgary 18-5, 21-8, and then the third period was even at 9-9. And then when you go to shots on goal, 11-6, 9-3, 5-2. Those are for 5-on-5 situations. That is a resounding amount of game control for a team up several goals, which tells me that to some degree, Calgary simply doesn't have the guys. And we know that to some degree, that the Flames just aren't that talented of a team. And when you're not that talented, you have to work a lot harder. And you have to play a very specific style of hockey to make up that skill gap. And we generally see teams that are a little bit less talented, slower, are generally going to try and become a bit of a slow the game down team. They're going to try and minimize the number of opportunities in the given game. But because the Flames really lack the caliber of player requisite with pushing control of the game, the Oilers were able to impose their will. And one of the real tells in a game like that is the fact that the Oilers dominated the high danger chances by period. First period, 5-1. Second period, 8-1. Third period, 2-0. The Flames are credited with 2 high danger chances for the entire game. That tells me the Oilers had dominant control of this game. They did not give the Flames a realistic chance to get back into the mix by creating dangerous offense. The Oilers were by and large content to allow them to take pot shots from the outside, let possession go back the other way, and the Oilers were more than happy to control the game. And then you earn 5 power play opportunities in a game. You are making the other team uncomfortable, and you have broken down their discipline. And I can empathize, and I don't want to spend too much time waxing nostalgic, or waxing poetically, I should say, about a bad hockey team like the Flames. But that's got to be mentally taxing to be someone on that team, to be Mackenzie Weegar, Rasmus Anderson, Nazem Kadri, Blake Coleman, somebody who's got a lot of pride, who's been in the NHL for a long time, and to come to work every day knowing that even if I try my best most of the time, we're simply not going to be good enough to win most nights. And that weighs on you. And even if you're not going to subconsciously, even if you're not actively going to say, well, if we can't win, why am I going to try? That type of thinking does permeate. It sticks with you. It is really challenging. And look, they're professional athletes. They understand what they signed up for to some degree. They understand that if the situation becomes that imperiling mentally, you have options, you have leverages to play to try and get a more favorable situation, whether that's internally or moved somewhere else. But every day coming to the rink knowing almost certainly you're going to lose, that weighs on you. And that is a team that is still likely at least 2-3 years away from being ready to even push for a playoff spot, let alone be considered a serious Stanley Cup contender. And you have to make those trade-offs. There is simply no other way to acquire elite talent with any real frequency in this league. And because you're a smaller market team, you're going to have a harder time drawing talent because of the questions about your ownership's commitment to mediocrity as opposed to trying to win. It's hard to entice people to sign with the Flames as free agents in a way that it isn't for the Oilers, who spend the cap, who have been serious contenders for a while, who have 2 of the 3-4 best players in the world on the same team. It's a lot more enticing. But for those Flames guys, I do not envy their journey one bit. We are going to take our second and final break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, we'll talk about the Connor Ingram / Calvin Pickard recipe the Oilers are going to need for the next few weeks in the absence of Tristan Jarry. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Christmas edition of Locked On Oilers. No matter what you're doing today, if it's just a normal day for you, if you got to work, thank you for taking the time. If you're working out before you go see friends or family early in the morning, trying to keep to your normal routine like me, appreciate it. If you're listening in the car on the way and you're dreading it, I'm sorry. I hope this is keeping you a little bit of comfort, talking about a good win and your Oilers, who are on a very nice run of form as of late. I am very grateful that Christmas is at my house. I don't have to go anywhere, but it is not always the easiest, the holidays. You take stock on things, you mentally start looking towards the new year, and it's an opportunity to reflect, and you can't take that stuff for granted. It is important time to time to take that action actively reflect, to set some goals, and start thinking about where you want to go in the coming year. So with that said, the Oilers are talking week to week for Tristan Jarry. Week to week is quite ambiguous, and it's funny how seriously the NHL takes injury security, because the other sports, it's an obligation. You have to disclose what the player's injuries are, and we're talking about the NFL, which isn't exactly basket weaving when it comes to physicality, but that's a different conversation for a different show. As far as the Oilers and managing what they can, they're controllables, if you will. And you're never going to be able to create the perfect environment, especially for a goalie like this. That's going to require a lot. Because being candid, the Oilers do not ask a lot of their goalies on a nightly basis. Like we talked about before, over the last 10 games, that win percentage, they have an .897 team save percentage, which would be slightly above league average, and they've managed 7-2-1 in that stretch. I shudder to think of what the Oilers could be with .905, maybe even, dare I say, .910 goaltending. You think about what a Shesterkin or a Sorokin could potentially look like on a team like this that plays such solid game control hockey where there just isn't a lot of defensive responsibility. It's pretty enticing. So for the season, the Oilers have conceded 1,020 shots on goal in 38 games. That comes out to 26.8 shots on goal against per game. That's 20th. They are 20th overall in shots on goal against. Again, this is not a situation where a goalie is being thrown to the wolves. This is not a situation where a goalie is being asked to steal games. This isn't like when Devin Dubnyk came in for the Wild all those years ago, or Andrew Hammond came in for the Senators. This is not a situation like that where an undermatched goalie is playing out of his depth. The Oilers are simply asking for average, league average NHL goaltending, and they would have a significantly better record than they would have right now. The Oilers have the worst team save percentage in the entire NHL on Christmas, and they are still in a playoff spot. Just food for thought, some perspective to frame your thinking about this team. They have the 20th best penalty kill. That definitely is a bit of a red flag as far as your workload, your responsibility for these goalies who at even strength, again, are not asked to do a whole lot. But if the penalty kill is a little leaky, if it's struggling to some degree, I do think there's a conversation there. And I do think the penalty kill is an area where there is some opportunity for some room for improvement. And I think the Oilers have made some calculated decisions as far as that goes about not having McDavid kill penalties. I think that 1 minute per game swing of just giving him a little bit of extra rest and a little bit less ice time has shown you the capacity for maximum efficiency over the last month or so, where they've dialed his minutes down about 1 full minute per game, and he has played some of the best hockey of his life over the last 3 weeks. I think that's definitely worth. The reason I think it's fair to say the Oilers aren't asking a lot, the Oilers have scored the third most goals of any team in the NHL so far this year, all situations. They have the second most power play goals. They have the best power play in the NHL so far this year. They have the third best shooting percentage this year. All of that tells me the Oilers are doing a pretty solid job offensively of giving their team a chance to win most nights. And candidly, a lot of that offense has come over the last 3 weeks or so, where the underlying numbers have started to come around. The high danger chances are up, the expected goals are up, and they're converting scoring chances at a better rate than they were a while ago. And that's put them in a position where they can afford a little bit of breathing room. You score 4 goals a night, it's okay if your goalie faces 27 shots and he gives up 3. Now, that's a workable path. If we're conceding 27 or so shots on goal per game, and he needs to save 23 or 4 of them, and you can still win, that's pretty good. The other stat I have written down here for you, in games where the Oilers concede 3 or fewer goals, their record this year is 15-3-2. 3 or fewer, not 2, not 1, 3 or fewer goals, 15-3-2. That is a workable path. All the Oilers need is passable goaltending. You have the odd game where you can hold the opponent to 19, 20 shots the way the Oilers held the Flames the other night. All Connor Ingram's got to do is not lose you the game, and that's enough. And I have been, hand up, I have been pretty harsh on Ingram and on Pickard as a tandem. They are, in practice, two AHL goalies. Pickard has been the worst goalie in the NHL this year. He has looked entirely out of his depth. Connor Ingram has only played 2 games. He's won 1. He's lost 1. We will see what his capacity going forward is to look like an NHL caliber goalie. And again, the Oilers are not asking a whole lot of these guys. 24, 25 saves a night is nothing crazy. You think about some of the workloads some of the more talented goalies face and some of the more leaky defenses concede. All of this is to say, the Oilers are going to give themselves a reasonable chance to win the way they're playing as of late. And if they can just get passable NHL goaltending, they can really start to do some damage in the standings. And I'm not particularly caught up about 1 seed, 2 seed, 3 seed, home ice. The Oilers showed you last year in the postseason that home ice ultimately is not that important for a veteran-laden, professional-heavy team the way the Oilers are, who were able to go on the road and win 3 straight playoff series as the lower seed, and then ultimately, of course, losing, ironically, in the one series where they did have home ice against the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup final. But you start to really make some damage. You start to make progress in the standings. You start to feel good about your game. We start to talk about ceiling instead of floor. For a lot of the first 2 months of this season, we were very caught up with the floor. We were trying not to lose games. We were just trying to hang on. And now, as the lineup has started to come into shape, I have loved what I have seen from Spencer Stastny since his acquisition from the Predators. And you start to game out the shape of this lineup, what it needs realistically in terms of pieces, whether you want to entertain a Marc-Andre Fleury conversation, if you want to maybe trade for Alex Lyon. There are guys out there worth entertaining to be in a tandem with Tristan Jarry whenever Jarry does return from that lower body injury. But that will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much to everybody that made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. If you're watching on video, we send you over to the first ever Locked On National YouTube channel, streaming 24/7. If you're on audio, be sure to go check out Locked On NHL, game night where the guys are breaking down every game, every night until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned in June. Everyone have a safe and fun holiday. I will talk to you guys tomorrow going into the weekend. Everyone have a good one. And until then, let's go Oilers.